But I've had this since I can remember, since I was, I don't know, 5 years old or younger. Generally, it was much more at night. It was much more when the whole house fell silent. And then I was really scared because deep down I started to feel people, to feel them sitting on my bed, and to feel them talking to me. And it happened a lot that I heard them talking to me, but I heard murmurs. I heard it was like they were talking to me, and I tried to understand, but I couldn't, and I heard laughter. It was a somewhat terrifying thing for me.
Welcome to this new episode of Out of the Matrix in the Invisible. Today I have the pleasure of sharing with Mariela Ramos. She is a medium, a channeler, but she is also clairvoyant. With her, we will address these topics and see, for example, what the difference is between channeling, mediumship, and clairvoyance. Hello, Mariela. How are you? I really appreciate the fact that you accepted the invitation to this new episode of Out of the Matrix in the Invisible. So, feel at home.
Hello, Esteban. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone.
Likewise. Mariela, I know that you define yourself as a channeler, a medium, and also as a clairvoyant. What differences do you see between channeling, mediumship, and clairvoyance?
Let's see. I have it in perceptual terms, I perceive the difference very well. When I connect with a deceased loved one, I see clearly, let's say, the messages, yes, that I know are from another person who was a human. But it happens to me that when I channel, that the information I receive feels like it's from another place. It's like a more distant place, but it's more like energy than the sensation of having been flesh, so to speak. My perception is that truly when one channels, they channel with guides or with energy or whatever it may be. But it's like an energy that hasn't been here before. It's not like an energy that has earth or that has had earth, That's the difference I feel. And in terms of clairvoyance, of course, I consider myself clairvoyant because I also have the ability to see a bit into the future sometimes, For example, I don't know if someone is going to get pregnant, what that baby is going to do, dates, things that are going to happen, those things that appear to me. And I tend to be very accurate. That's why I also talk about clairvoyance.
So when you connect with someone who has passed away, you feel it more as a human connection. And when you connect through channeling, you feel it more as another type of consciousness. Now,
exactly.
This feeling, as you were telling me, you notice it differently. And when you connect through channeling, do you feel it as a personality, like a personality structure as a person might be? Or do you feel it more as neutral?
No, I feel it more as neutral. Absolutely neutral. Maybe, of course, there can be some characteristics, more feminine characteristics, and others more masculine, energy-like. But in general, it's super, super neutral. And I feel them more distant, like from other places, much farther away. It's not, they're not here. I feel that the dead, so to speak, are much closer. They're like in the same dimension, like just opening a door, nothing more, right? Like very close. But this other thing I find much more distant. It's like another matrix, let's say, a very different feeling.
Hey, and is there a difference between what some and others convey to you?
Yes, there is a difference. Yes. When I channel, the energy that comes to me and the information that comes to me is much more subtle information. It's information that one should kind of decipher more, right? It has a greater depth. It has more to do with the essence of life, with what needs to be advanced. It has to do with another type of messages, And obviously, of course, when it has to do with loved ones, it sometimes involves life tests or things like that, which in the end somehow emotionally connect with the person consulting. But the energy that comes to me from the channeling is very different. It has more to do with the essence of life, like reaching to try to understand the what, let's say, right?
Is the type of message more metaphorical?
It's more metaphorical, yes. but also very accurate, very accurate. I mean, it's like me also telling the person what they're telling me is that you're going through this moment, this moment, this moment, and it's even happening with this person. I mean, it's very accurate, but it has more to do with reaching the depths of the soul, let's say.
Got it. When people seek you out for a channeling, it's because they have internal conflicts and want to clear things up and connect with a guide or something like that. And when they seek you as a medium, it's because they want to connect with someone who has passed away, right? That's right.
Exactly. Exactly, of course. And with channeling, basically what I usually do is like an introduction that should last, well, about 20 minutes, where I talk about what I receive, about the moment you're in, what's happening, what happened before, etc. And from there, basically, we delve into what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and that's it. But I receive like a bombardment of information, very strong. So I write, and usually before I connect a little beforehand. And I write, and I already have like the whole, like the general idea of what the person is experiencing, is going through. And from there, we start to delve into it.
Mariela, how and when did you discover that you were a channeler, medium, and clairvoyant? Was there something that came first, another later, or did they all happen at the same time?
I think it was a mix of everything at the same time, but deep down, over time, I started to give it a name. But I've had this since I can remember, since I was 5 years old or younger. Of course, at the beginning, it happened to me that it was like, it was generally much more at night, much more when the whole house fell silent. And then I was very scared because deep down I started to feel people, to feel them sitting on my bed, to feel them talking to me. And it happened a lot that I heard them talking to me, but I heard murmurs, I heard like the A's. And I tried to understand and I didn't understand, and I heard laughter. It was a bit terrifying for me. A lot of that happened when I was a child, but it also happened that I have a mediumship and a very dreamlike channeling, so I dreamed a lot. I dreamed a lot about things that belonged to others, that were for others, and I dreamed about many things that later happened. So that's why I have to say it's a huge mix. Because I clearly dreamed about people who were going to die. I dreamed about things that were going to happen to them. I dreamed about things that were happening to a certain person internally. So I say it's a mix that I later managed to separate. But of course, I mean, when I was a child, things happened to me that I saw. I dreamed about accidents that I would see on the news the next day, just like that. So it was like super impactful, an impressive thing, super impactful. For being so young, it was a very terrible thing. And things also happened with family members, having to tell them, don't travel to such a place because there will be an accident tomorrow, and then seeing the accident on TV. I mean, very strong things like that.
Did your family understand what was happening to you as a child? Did they know? Did they take it seriously, or did they think it was just your imagination?
Let's see. I remember my mom, I think I verbalized it with her more than anything. And my mom was like, this little girl who does nothing but dream and talk and dream, like a dream machine. This little girl who was a dream machine. Every day I would wake up and say, Mom, look, I'm a granddaughter and everything. And she was like, okay, but let's slow down a bit. And then I think when I was about 15, I remember she took me to a neurologist because I was already telling her that I was hearing things. So she took me to a neurologist. So I was probably having an episode. So they did an EEG, they did a bunch of things, and I didn't understand anything. Now, my mom was a very sensitive woman, everything, but of course, surely as a mother, she was scared too. And later on, over time, she understood what you wanted. But it's not an easy topic to handle in life. I think it happens to all of us. Besides, I have like a double life in that sense.
Notice that what you just described about hearing people talking, laughter, suddenly one person speaking, two, three, sometimes you feel like there's a crowd of people. It's like suddenly you wake up or you're in a very calm state, and it's as if you're in the middle of a bar full of people talking at the same time. That happened to me too. When I tell you that they also took me not to a neurologist, but they did take me to a child psychologist. And luckily, they said I was a normal child, basically. that I was just imagining it. I was very creative. Hey, is there any experience that has impacted you that you could share with us that has marked you, whether in channeling, mediumship, or clairvoyance?
Let's see, look, many things, but one that marked me a lot, and it wasn't that long ago. Regarding that, I want to say that I'm super open to everything. I can discover in this world, like, I don't commit to anything because, besides, I only believe in energy, but I don't have any other beliefs. So I also become a bit doubtful of everything, I question everything, etc. So many things keep happening to me that surprise me. And a couple of months ago, something happened where a person wanted to connect with their grandmother, with their close ones. And something very strange happened to me because I connected with the person and I saw them here, but their face was here and they looked at me deeply. And of course, when I receive the information, I receive it telepathically. I don't see them moving their lips or anything telepathically. But I saw her and her eyes pierced me and she said, we are the same. Like that, we are the same. You do the same as I do, but in a different field. We know each other. Let's recognize each other deep down. She told me. I didn't understand. I didn't get it. But why is she telling me this? And she showed me that it's your energy, and you're looking for me in the wrong place. She said, I'm not where everyone else is. I'm here. I'm at the center of the earth. And she showed me the earth's energy.
Earth?
She showed me the earth's energy. Yes, the earth's energy. And I was saying, I can't understand. I couldn't understand. And talking with the person, with her granddaughter, I tell her all this that I was feeling. And she tells me that my grandmother was a yatiri, that yatiris are shamans, they are healers, there are maras.
Look at that.
Of course, they are healers, they are maras, which I also didn't know. I had no idea. In my ignorance, of course, it's like when you say shaman, you don't think of other places on earth, but I didn't identify this. And it was impressive because also, of course, they have a connection with the earth. They have a connection with the earth. So there, of course, later I would say, of course, surely there are certain healers, certain shamans, certain energies that remain in other places that don't necessarily go to this place that one intuits exists. And I say intuits because I don't really have certainty. But deep down, there are other places with other energies that decide to go to another space or work in another space. And I felt that she worked in the space of the earth. She didn't work elsewhere. So that was impressive. It was impressive because I said, oh, so many other things must exist that we have no idea about, let's say. It was very, very, very incredible. All her messages were related to the earth. I mean, she was concerned about her flames. She was concerned about the crops. She was concerned about other things. And naming those things was something entirely different.
Look how interesting. I want to interview, and I will do it soon, a Mapuche medium. That's the idea. It's also super interesting to see their approach because they are also mediums. I mean, a Mapuche Machi, I meant to say, which is like for those who don't know, it's like a priestess who connects with the beyond in the Mapuche culture, which is an ancestral culture. Here in Chile, in South America in general, in the southern cone, in the south of South America. Hey, okay, hey, Mariela, how is the way, if you could summarize it, more or less, how is the way you connect as a medium or when you do it through channeling? Is it the same? Do you enter in the same way or is the process different for you?
Look, to start with, it has been changing over time. A lot, a lot, a lot. It has been changing over time because also, as I was telling you, I have a very dreamlike connection. So for many years, it happened that I received all the information the night before about what I was going to work on the next day, which was tremendously exhausting, super exhausting, because I would wake up many times at night and write. I would start writing. Or if not, I would wake up in the morning and write. Immediately, as soon as I opened my eyes, everything I had dreamed and everything I had felt with a lot of clarity about what was mine and what was coming for the next session. That was with a lot of clarity, knowing this is mine, this is not mine, etc. And the dreams were very vivid, with me being the person I was going to connect with the next day.
Like in the first person.
In the first person, even feeling the death, feeling the accident tremendously from the record. And then the next day, I would connect with their whole story. And that story would then be unraveled, revealing other things. This applies both to channeling and to the topic of mediumship. So I even wrote things down without having a session the next day because I knew it would be for the next session that came. So I had to organize. It was terrible. Until one day I said and asked, I said, please, I can't keep having such an intense dream like mediumship at this level. Send me messages, but I need to connect the next day like this. And I decided that deep down, the way that suits me best, also considering the insecurities each person might have, is to connect beforehand. So I put myself in a space where I also darken everything. I have to darken everything, play music, and that's when the information starts coming to me. I receive information, I write, and then I have the session. So for me, each session is 2 hours, 2 hours and a bit. It's not less than that. And then I connect with the person and start talking about what comes to me, what has come to me, but also what continues to come. So it's a long process, but it's been what has also allowed me to feel more secure in it.
When you say you connect beforehand, how long? Before the session, do you do that?
No, I am there an hour before. Okay?
That has happened to me. I have felt similar. Half an hour.
Yes. I am there about an hour before when it's a connection with a loved one. Half an hour before when it's a channeling. Channeling flows to me very quickly. And the connection with a loved one is a bit slower for me.
Based on your experience as a medium and channeler, have you learned anything about the beyond? What do you think? How do you believe the beyond is?
Well, I have the feeling that it's not really that far beyond. I feel like it's right next to us. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like it's right here next to us, as I said before, like opening the door and it's there. It's like it's right next to us. But I also have the feeling that each of the deceased also chooses a bit where to be, depending on the journey they are undertaking. I've seen people who want to be in spaces with a lot of nature, very peaceful, more disconnected, let's say, from the rest and more reflective, etc. Others arrive and immediately connect with others and find themselves in a more sociable moment. It seems like this varies a lot. That's my feeling. Like deep down, one can decide where to be at any given moment. Then is that okay? I've also experienced hearing people say, I'm with such and such virgin, or like such and such virgin existed, or I'm with such and such angel who were, moreover, devotees of this virgin or that angel or that saint, etc. I've also seen that, just as I've seen others who have said something like, there's nothing here. Yeah, there's nothing more. It's the same. So I have a bit of a feeling about that, like what one believes or what one proposes is somewhat what one arrives at. Like all of that is welcome, regardless of where one goes, what one believes, or what one proposes. That's my feeling.
Okay, so for you, there's no defined place, like something one could, like a place that, in general terms, one would understand as the afterlife. It's very variable depending on the belief and the level of consciousness of the person who has passed away, basically.
Yes, but I feel that the sensation is the same. I mean, the sensation of fulfillment, the sensation of happiness, the feeling of being complete is the same. It's just that the spaces you can choose to be in and the beliefs you've had that are maintained vary, And this connects a bit with what I was telling you before about the lady who was a Yatiri, that basically those who have believed, maybe those who are more Catholic or so on, the idea of heaven is shown as a place like that. And this other lady shows being on the earth, shows being connected to her land and continues working for her land. So it's like what I think happens, that basically one also follows a place that one already knows, that the soul knows. I don't know. Well, it's very strange. Everything is very strange. I kind of propose that too. I mean, it's like a discovery, and I wouldn't commit to anything. I wouldn't have the ability to say with certainty, no, I'm sure this has happened, because basically each session you have, there are very different things from one another.
I have the impression that there is a phase after disincarnating, after leaving the body here, that is somewhat illusory phase. So there, your belief system and your experiences are very much determined, basically, and that is somewhat determined by what you feel and what you live, no? But it's a bit illusory. And then there is a moment when the person becomes clear, becomes aware, understands that they are living in a somewhat illusory experience, and then they move to another state. That's the impression I have, and that's how I've understood it. And I tend to suppose that there is a remnant of our mental and emotional body that is still active, and that's why this illusory experience is lived even without a physical body. That's kind of the more impression I have. In your experiences, as a medium, for example, have you had any complex experiences?
Let's see. I would divide it into two things there. One, which I will address second, is one that I feel has a lot to do with the disposition of the client as well.
I was going to ask you about that too.
Yes, I feel it has a lot to do with the disposition of the client. I mean, the sessions that haven't worked out for me, which haven't been many, have had to do with the client's disposition, with something like not treating it as an appointment, when ultimately this is an appointment, it's a meeting. So suddenly you see people lying in bed, or with a bad attitude, or constantly testing you, testing the medium. And that immediately, for me at least, cuts off the energy channel. I believe it surely has more to do with me than with anything else. I mean, my disposition changes as well. So I feel that it's very difficult to handle. Over time, obviously, I've learned to manage it, and somehow ultimately by ending the session. But it's difficult for me to handle, and it's always a fear, because it's something I'm always say before having a session. I'm so nervous that I say, why am I doing this? Why? That happens to me. I feel like I wish the person would cancel. That happens to me because obviously you always have the feeling that it's not going to work out, that messages aren't going to get through, that you're not going to see anything. And that happens. That's the human part of oneself. I imagine that you must also experience that feeling of going to arrive, going to present. Of course, that happens. So having to manage that, and on top of that, dealing with a bad attitude from the other side is very difficult. So that's difficult for me to handle. And the other thing, going to the topic, that has to do with the connection itself. Yeah, I remember once I had to connect with a boy, who had passed away, who had been killed, who had been beaten to death, and he was in a place I hadn't seen before. I had never seen this place before, and it was like a separate place. It was like within the same place where you always feel and perceive it. But this was like a separate space. It was like a small room, a kind of energetic room. Besides, I saw his energy being connected to the earth and connected to the other space. But like that, with great clarity, just as you see and feel them absolutely connected over there in the other place, this one was connected with the earth and here. I mean, it didn't want to detach, but it's not like it was stuck here, as people sometimes say. No, it was over there, but it was still thinking about this and angry and frustrated, and not realizing that deep down it was a matter of opening the door and essentially entering this place and letting go. That had never happened to me before. And it was like at that moment I thought, what am I doing here? I said, well, when I have to show it that it can turn around and look the other way, like cut this anger it had, and I did that exercise of trying to show it the other side, telling it, open the door, go out, come, disconnect. There's no point, don't stay there. That happened to me. But it was very surprising because deep down it had never happened to me. So I was asking myself, what am I doing here? What do I have to do?
What he tells you is very true. Pay attention. Even though one may have been practicing mediumship for many years, there is always a certain anxiety before a session that one has to manage because we don't objectively know if it will work or not. So that uncertainty creates a tension there. Even for me, it happens that although I sense people and have perceived many things, I then have to verify if those people are related to the client or not, let's say. At least that's what happens to me, and it generates some degree of anxiety, which decreases once the session starts. But before the session, I experience exactly the same thing as you do. I imagine other colleagues feel exactly the same. Mariela, the people who seek you out, for example, for channeling, mediumship, or clairvoyance, are they different profiles, different people, or is it very similar? And why do they seek you out?
Let's see. I think that yes, but I would say that the profiles are quite similar. Suddenly, more different people show up, but in general, it's people who, of course, are looking for answers, but who also believe in this. That's why I tell you that generally when things start to slow down and everything, it tends to be with people who deep down are testing you. They want to I want to see if this is true. I want to see if this really exists. But in general, so of course, it's people who have the profile of seeking in terms of channeling, mostly those who want to develop spiritually. That is very pronounced. People who truly have a constant effort in various areas, let's say, who are developing their spiritual point and want to understand where it comes from. And now, in the case of loved ones, of course, it has to do with the issue of how to resolve many times issues that have been left unresolved. Very painful griefs. And sometimes also wanting to understand what was further back, because it also happens to me sometimes that they want to connect with a grandmother they never met.
Yes, that happens with certain frequencies.
Yes, like I want to connect with her. Well, because I didn't know her, I want to know what information is there, and sometimes wonderful things come out. But of course, the main focus, the big focus in terms of connecting with loved ones has to do with knowing if they are okay, and the issue of basically being able to close certain cycles, certain unresolved pains or unfinished conversations, fights, deaths where they were already fighting and suddenly passed away. It has a bit to do with that. Yes, terrible.
Hey, and it happens to me that when people want a session but they have nothing to close, they are not dealing with any grief and do it mostly out of curiosity, those sessions, in my case, tend not to work, you see. Like I can't manage to connect because I always think there's no underlying reason for this exercise to happen, because if they go just out of curiosity, it won't happen. So I always tell people that if they want to connect out of curiosity, I recommend that they don't do it because it doesn't make sense. The purpose for me, at least, of having a mediumistic experience is to close a cycle, advance in grief, when there is an underlying reason to resolve an unresolved issue. That is the purpose for me. And regarding what you were saying about the clients and the client's attitude, I think that as a human, one is naturally affected by someone's attitude. But I've had some experiences where beyond the attitude, I've managed to overlook it and the session works just the same. It's very crazy. But I'm going to recount a case and make it very short. It happened to me once that there were like 3 sisters and a brother in a session. And it seems that the brother hadn't been told what he was going for. And when he arrived, And I started to explain. He was like pressured and said to me, "So you connect with the deceased," or something like that. And his attitude was like this.
The heart closed and well protected.
Then looking very serious. And the sisters were much more open, obviously, to the topic. They were the ones who contacted me and noticed that the session started to flow, to flow, to flow. And there were things that were very specific and very precise for him. It was his mom, I remember, until suddenly the guy's barriers all fell down. And he was the most moved, the one who cried the most, with the sisters consoling him. It was like completely turning him around. When you encounter someone who is very skeptical and the session is very powerful, people don't understand anything, but you turn them around in that sense.
Yes, that's wonderful. I find that very incredible. Also, like when suddenly it could happen because of what you were saying. Like the person didn't even know they were going there, didn't know what they were going to do, let's say. It happened to me with a girl who wanted this thing I was telling you about because she wanted to connect with a grandmother she hadn't met. And at the last minute, another person appears on the screen. And I say to her, "You're with another person." Yes, I'm with my mom. Yeah, oh, whom I invited. I invited my mom. And it was impressive because she basically at the last minute said, "Okay, I'll join this." And I said, "And the problem?" And the whole session was ultimately directed towards the mother, not the granddaughter. It was a connection between the mother and her daughter. And it was like that, but super emotional, super intense, super impactful. So there it's also like what I say that ultimately the clients call upon, but the deceased also call upon. Like, how do I reach out to communicate with? I reach my granddaughter, so she wants to communicate with me. In fact, this granddaughter had a channeling session with another person, and in that session, her grandmother appeared wanting to communicate with her. And that's when she contacted me. So I said, of course, the long way around, let's say. But I am also convinced that loved ones call upon you in some way. So I call upon the granddaughter to talk to my daughter, right? So that's incredible how a session can change and take a turn and a twist and transform into something super healing without even knowing it.
Has it ever happened to you that suddenly, someone contacts you for a session, and they are accompanied by a friend, and nothing comes out related to the person who contacted you, and the session is for the companion?
Yes, yes, that does happen. And also, what has happened to me, is that, it must have happened to you too, that suddenly others appear who have nothing to do with it. And it's like, uh, I don't know, suddenly I say, wait a moment, there's a guy here with long hair, green eyes, who is peeking in. He's just saying hello. He says he's just greeting, that he's not from the family, but he says he's fine. But he just wants to say that. And she tells you, and she tells me, oh, yes, it's the neighbor who committed suicide last week. So I say, okay, I mean, clearly the message is from the neighbor saying that he's fine, that you should tell and inform that he's fine. That too. Has that happened to you? It has happened to me several times, like other people appear giving messages like that.
It has happened to me, and it has also happened sometimes that not only like with a greeting, but with very specific things, and sometimes a bit extensive. It has happened mostly with people who have contact with other people, for example, who are very close friends or a relative, but they clearly recognize it by the details given. It's like I pass on my message, It's like I take advantage of this space and I can enter, and then it's the person's job to communicate that information which is not directly for them, you see? Yes, that has happened to me. Hey, Mariela, you were living in Spain, right?
Yes, I lived in Spain for 4 years, in Granada.
And in Spain, did you also dedicate yourself to mediumship, to channeling?
Yes, but only online. And I sometimes worked, of course, with some Spaniards, but the vast majority have always been people from Chile. Yes.
Hey, and how do you see the receptivity or the way, for example, in Spain or in Europe? They view these topics. And if you compared it with Chile or Latin America, do you see any difference, or is it the same for you?
No, I feel that people are much more skeptical. In general, they don't believe. And also people, at least what happened to me is that it's very Catholic over there.
I see in the south, of course.
Of course, in the south, in Andalusia, let's say, very, very Catholic. So this doesn't have space, you know? This kind of doesn't have much space. It's like bothering the dead. It's like quackery. There's not much space for this. So in general, also something I didn't talk about. I mean, it's already hard for me to talk about it here to say what I do, even less so there. If they ask me, what do you do? No, I work in the spiritual field. I do therapy. I don't know anything else because I wasn't going to say that I talk to the dead. I mean, that's like over there. No, no, no. There's not much room for that. I'm talking about in Andalusia, in Granada. I imagine that in Barcelona, in Madrid, it must be a different openness, let's say. But there it was very difficult, very, very complex, right? I worked very discreetly, like without it being widely known.
Right, perfect. You hadn't made it public, or at least not openly.
Of course,
Hey, do you think that regarding the guides, right? The guides, do you think that everyone can connect with their own guides? What do you think about that?
I think that deep down we all somehow connect. We all connect in some way. What happens is that, of course, the people who are more rational deep down and who need to have more concrete answers find it very difficult to finally differentiate what information is coming through. Okay, this I think it's complex from that point of view. You know, I mean, anyone who deep down doesn't believe in this, anyone who doesn't believe that other energies exist deep down, or that one can channel, or that one is a channel of information itself, if they don't believe, it's very difficult to work on that with, you know. And I feel the same way a bit about mediumship. I mean, I think that because of this, because there's such a big boom with the topic of mediumship and so many courses and so many schools and everything, I also think I've seen people who have never done mediumship and who take a course and open up and become great mediums, and it's wonderful. But I also think there are other people who deep down don't flow, you know? I think it doesn't flow. I think it's a delicate subject there, and there's a delicate issue also in how to work with the topic of mediumship, because of course, for example, the other day I uploaded a reel because a lady wrote to me, very worried, saying that she had a mediumship session and was told that her mother was in a hospital of souls suffering.
She cries, yeah.
So, you know, that she was there suffering, that she was going to stay there for a while longer, that she was distressed. So I say, such little empathy, huh? So little care. I mean, no. I think you have to be super, super discerning and careful with what you're going to say and what you're going to show. Also, you can't show something when deep down you're not absolutely sure that it's true.
Of course.
Sometimes you see the deceased who are more reflective, who are more introspective, who are working through their processes and whatnot. But honestly, I've never seen anyone who is distressed, having a terrible time. That's not the case.
Yes. Yes. Besides, people are in a very vulnerable and very open situation, right? Very receptive. So one has to be at least minimally empathetic, right? In the situation of the other person who is going through grief and having a hard time, for you to say something like that to them. You know, once a person from Colombia contacted me, a girl from Colombia, and she was super overwhelmed because she had gone to a medium, a medium who had told her that her deceased husband was in a terrible state, like in purgatory, and that he had to perform a series of rituals to get him out of there, and that to perform the rituals, they were in stages, and she had to transfer him some money that he wouldn't use for himself, but would leave under an altar. Wow, but how terrible. And she was very distressed, very desperate, and it wasn't a small amount of money. That's why she saw me on Instagram and wrote to me to see what I thought about it, and she was about to transfer the money. I told her not to transfer a single penny to that charlatan. Oh, because she kind of delayed it, and he was pressuring her to do it on a specific day. And then the thing is that she told him She wasn't going to do it, and he started threatening her, saying her husband would be worse off. And finally, I told her, you know what, block him because he's going to scam you, basically.
Exactly. Yes, that's why it happens a lot. A lot of people come to you saying, moreover, that they were told they needed to do a cleansing, that they had to, etc. That is very common. And I always convey this to people. Oh, because I often get requests like, help me, my dad is having such a problem. He's receiving bad energies. Someone did a spell on him. And I always tell people, don't give so much power to humans. Humans don't have enough power to do so much harm to someone. And put something on them that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It exists, just like when one says, because I also sometimes do energy cleansings, but I tell them, I don't do an energy cleansing in a house because there's something, a bad vibe buried there. No, it has to do with our own energy, with our own wear and tear, with our sorrows, with our fatigue, and that in the end, somehow, also becomes the energy of the spaces. And it has to do with that. But no one has enough power to harm you. I don't believe in that.
I don't believe in that. I feel the same way as you about it. But notice that I think when we believe in those things, that's when we give them power and we predispose ourselves to those things happening or our lives getting stuck. So the main problem is us and our beliefs regarding those topics. If you feel vulnerable and think that someone is really going to cast an evil eye on you or something like that, you're opening the door for your life to eventually follow that path. But if you don't believe in any of that, nothing happens. Exactly. Notice that the Mapuches, for example, say that there are certain situations that the Huincas, as they call us, those who are not Mapuches, are kind of exempt from certain situations because they don't believe or because they don't know. So nothing happens to them. But since they believe and know, then there are certain things that affect them and not the Huincas.
Exactly. That's why I tell people that they always have to be very attentive to that. Because, of course, sometimes people write to me and say, of course, this person is like possessed. I tell them, watch out. No, I mean, I could tell you right now, sure, we're going to do 4 cleansing sessions and all that. No, nothing happens. Nothing happens. I mean, be clear that deep down it has to do with your process, with something you are experiencing or have experienced. And deep down, that's a bit stuck there. And also be very careful with mental health issues, because sometimes you also tell people, you know what, it would be good for that person to see a psychiatrist, to have an evaluation, because maybe they're having some kind of episode. And if that doesn't happen, then we can talk. But always being very cautious and careful with these issues, because if not, forget it. I've seen people who have had 5 cleansings and still need one more. I mean, it's horrible.
Yes, there are people who are experts in that, and it's like they take all their money because one cleansing after another is money. More money, more money. It's like an eternal hook. And notice that I was going to ask you, we've already talked about it a little, but regarding social media, what do you think? I would say it's almost like an overexposure of mediumship on social media. Many people, for example, are posting fragments of sessions on Instagram. Suddenly I see that there are people who post. What impression do you have about that?
Well, I don't do it. I don't do it at all. I never post any session ever. Never, never, never. One, because I find it to be something too intimate. I mean, it's a moment of intimacy. It's an appointment, as I say. It's an appointment that you don't dress up for like a gala, you know? I mean, it's really like going to dinner with your loved ones, gathering, meeting. No, I could never do it. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. The most I might do is if someone wrote to me and said, today, Mariela, the session was nice, thank you, etc. I ask that person, can I post this screenshot? That would be all, but I would never publish a session. However, of course, I have also seen that there are mediums who make it a condition, meaning that basically you book the appointment and below it says, I've seen it, it says the session will be recorded and used for later publication.
I can't believe it, really. I've never. Yes, 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 yes. Yes.
Yes, I've seen it. How shocking. I've seen it. But I imagine you go to book the session and below it says,
But I imagine those are free sessions, right? Like, I do it for free, but with this no,
no, no, no, no, no.
I can't believe it. But how a charge?
And it says there that the session will be used or that it can be used. Okay, for then.
That's an infinite shamelessness.
Tremendous because you're also playing with people who are desperate and want to communicate with their loved ones. Obviously, they just take the session and that's it. Sure, honestly, I don't like it, you know. If someone uses it and I don't know, it helps them to grow and everything, well, that's up to each person, but I don't think it's right. I don't like it, honestly. I don't.
You, as a medium, as a person who has had mediumship since childhood, just like me, like all the mediums I know who are mediums who have always had these kinds of experiences since they were children. What do you think about the fact that now a lot of schools and training programs have opened, and every month new mediums are emerging? On Instagram, I have many followers, and I see Pedrito Medium, Juanito Medium, and I wonder how there are suddenly so many mediums. What do you think about that?
Look, on one hand, I have mixed feelings because on one side, I find it wonderful that people are essentially opening up to having connections, ultimately also with themselves. I feel that mediumship also opens a path to connect with oneself, to discover a lot of things about oneself, and to try to resolve things on earth before dying. I mean, I think it's something that opens up in some way. Yeah, but I find it very delicate in terms of essentially opening up because you can open many things in a session, you know? It's as delicate as someone who isn't a psychologist doing psychological therapy, because you can open something that can really leave a mess in a relationship, etc. I mean, that's why I think that people who practice mediumship also need to develop other things, It's not necessarily that you have to have a profession or anything, but at least having worked on yourself and having some background that to also have answers to different things or to be able to interpret certain things. Because it's not just about having only evidential skills and naming things without connecting them. I mean, I think it's delicate. I think it's very delicate. I think it's delicate. And I think it's delicate that you can take a course for a week and be told, okay, now you can be a medium.
I think it's very delicate. Yes, you see, I've seen those situations where people take a course for 3 months, then 6 months, and then they open an Instagram account as a medium and start working professionally. It's very delicate, it's true. And regarding that, I'm quite critical of evidential mediumship, you see, because at least as I've seen it, or how it's presented in certain places, because they basically suggest that the medium only has to provide data, but there's never a deep message behind it. When I believe that the purpose of mediumship is that, it's like the message from the beyond to those here. I mean, what's the point of just giving data? Besides, you can get the data from psychic abilities and not from mediumship, so you could be connecting psychically and believe you're a medium if your school tells you that's mediumship.
Of course, I think one of the things to pay attention to is how the data you receive or the evidence must somehow be linked to a moment or information that needs to be developed, I don't know, for example, it happens to me that I call my practice a loving weave. That's what I call it, where you grab the thread, pulling it towards the information, but you are weaving a story, weaving a moment, weaving something that happened between the two, something that needs to be resolved between two, something that needs to be recognized. You understand? So if you receive, for example, yesterday, just to give an example, I had a session with a guy who wanted to connect with his grandmother, who had been like a mother to him, let's say, and the grandmother showed me that he had built a house, which in fact the grandmother hadn't had the chance to see. And she described the house and the space and everything to me. And she told me there was a camellia, that there was a camellia. So I say, there's a camellia and everything. Well, the camellia was in the same place that the grandmother had mentioned, but that camellias had an enormous emotional significance. an enormous emotional significance that connected him with his grandmother, as it was a gift she had given him, which had a whole story behind it. So, of course, you say there, okay, sure, it's a sign. And one says it's a proof of life, but it's a proof that has content, and that has content that in the end is going to heal a part, you know? It's going to make him feel, it's going to ultimately create that connection at that moment where he will feel his grandmother there, you know? This is what one seeks, for them to feel it again, which is basically what all mediums say. One is just this channel, the cord of the call, but the conversation has to happen there. Between them, they have to manage to feel each other. That's what one wants to achieve. Not just to say, oh, yes, it's him. He actually wore pants of that type.
Besides, they're not going to come from the beyond to tell you things like, oh, I used to wear pants like that, or hey, I like these shoes. They are going to come and say deeper things if it's a matter of common sense. I mean, if I'm in the afterlife and I have the possibility to communicate with my children who are here, I'm not going to come and tell them things like, hey, I lost my glasses, or things like that. I could mention certain details so they understand it's me, but deep down, I want to convey something a little deeper than that.
Yes. Generally, what I do is when I connect, I also play a bit with the deceased loved ones. I mean, sometimes I ask them questions, trying to organize the session a bit, because otherwise, I also need to have mental clarity. So sometimes I ask questions like, name something every day, something that has happened now, just recently, today, yesterday, something so the person can reaffirm. But I tell the person, I say, well, look, I asked a mundane question. So you know you're close. So I don't know, the person says, they say you need to fix the kitchen door that's falling apart. Oh, yes, I have the door. Yeah, but I do that and explain it precisely so they know that they are always present.
Of course, I do that at the beginning, in the early stages, to understand if I am well connected or not. I do it in the first phase, then it's like, this is what it means. You see? When I'm clear and the person is clear that we're on the right track.
Exactly. Yes. And besides, there are things that come easier to some than others. I mean, we all have an ease in seeing certain things. I, for example, am terrible with names.
In that I manage, I don't know why.
But I, for example, am terrible with names. I never get them right because I hear poorly. No, I'm terrible at those things. But for example, they know everything related to photographs, spaces. It comes to me like the photos just appear. These photos that are here next to me, look, they're here. And defining the photos, defining the places, names of cities, towns, that perfect. Plants come to me incredibly well. Everything when there are connections with important plants, incredible, but names, dates, terrible. So it's very curious how one refines certain things.
Yes, it's like each medium has a specific characteristic that distinguishes them from others, let's say. This is quite common. For me, names generally come easily. There are moments, weeks, when I'm very connected with that and I can give many names and sometimes very specific ones, but other times a week when not, for example, that can also happen to me. Do you feel that in all sessions you can interact, like asking the other side? Are there sessions where you see that it flows and others where it doesn't?
In some, yes, in some, no. I feel that loved ones still have the same character they always had. And sometimes you have a connection with the deceased and sometimes you don't. I mean, I've had to see some who talk to me like this, as if looking the other way. I feel that way, like they're looking the other way and they're fine, like they're a bit skeptical themselves, not paying much attention, not wanting to talk much, not wanting to communicate. And others who are very talkative, they talk and talk and talk and communicate and say things. But there are others who are quite reticent, which has a lot to do with character. But I also think it has a bit to do with the feeling, like it happens with people you suddenly click with, and others you don't. I think it also has to do with that.
Yes, you see, sometimes it happens that you connect with someone and you feel that those here, they need that connection, but on the other side they seem perfectly fine, like they have no conflict, so they are more neutral, and those here are much more intentional, excited, and the other side is calmer, like, well, I come because I understand I had to come, but it's like we're not intimidated, let's say.
And another thing I've noticed in what you're saying is that suddenly when there are some who are doing very well, it's like they come closer, give information, and then leave. They come closer, they leave. It's like a thing where they give three things and then come back as someone else. But like in a rush, as if deep down they're so well, so comfortable that they come and greet and say a couple of things, but then it's like they come closer and leave. That has happened to me.
Completely agree. I also experienced that sensation many times and I feel it much more fragmented when the departure, I'm speaking in general terms because there are always exceptions, when the departure has been very recent. Like I feel a signal that comes and goes, comes and goes. It's not so fluid in general. Yes. Hey, since you dedicated yourself to mediumship, to channeling, how would you say your life has changed, if it has changed, before and after?
Let's see. That's why I was telling you that I had a double life, because I am by profession a sociologist. I am a sociologist, and I worked for 20 years at the Ministry of Health until I went to Spain. I mean, I resigned a few days before going to Spain, but all that time I worked at the Ministry of Health, those 20 years, I practiced mediumship, I did channeling, and went through all the existing things that all of us have done, which is typical in the energetic search: Reiki, Bach flowers, 1,001 things. But I did all this. I attended and had a practice and basically held sessions and everything, but all under the radar, hidden. So, of course, people came to me and everything, but it was all through word of mouth. It was like, yes, I have a friend, I have my cousin, and that's how they came to me. So I worked and was always, during those 20 years that I worked at the ministry, after the ministry, and in the meantime, I attended and so on, like that. And of course, when I finally basically went to Spain, I said, okay, this is it. I mean, it's like I was pushed in this direction. The only thing I have to do is dedicate myself to this. And from there, I started to commit 100%. And my life has changed in terms of how much I love doing this. Despite the nerves, despite the nerves, despite the fatigue, because it's super exhausting. I mean, I don't do more than 2 sessions a day. Me neither. I don't do more than that, because I think it's important to be very respectful of energy, both one's own energy and others. I don't do more than that, because it also involves several hours for each session. But of course, I am infinitely happy. I mean, I feel like I've regained that vibration, that internal sensation of what makes you vibrate, like when you were a child. And that thing that, even though it scared me as a child, I found that essence again, like the essence of the vibration, that thing that makes you, that feeling like butterflies in the stomach. I felt that again in my day-to-day life. So wonderful. I felt that it has changed me a lot. Now, in terms of social aspects, I think it's a bit more difficult, because it's not just about saying what you do for a living.
Of course.
It's not that easy. It's not that easy. And in fact, yesterday I was talking about it with my partner, and I said, it's impressive how there are people, close friends of mine for life, who know that I am dedicated to this now, and it's like, how's it going? Good, but we don't go into any depth. They don't ask more. That's it. Is it going well for you? Yes, super well. Okay, done. So, of course, it's complex. I've seen how people look at me differently. No, that's very intense.
Yes. For me, it's inevitable in the society we live in.
Besides, I went to Spain during the pandemic, and that's where I started openly. So deep down, I always say these people must think that something happened to me during the pandemic.
Of course, the virus did something strange to you.
The scratch happened during the pandemic.
What myths about mediumship would you like to debunk for the people watching this video?
Let's see. Myths. One, the idea that there are spaces of punishment, purgatory, and all these places. This, okay. The idea that the bad ones go to one place and the good ones to another, it's not like that, even though it might be very painful for some people to think that the bad ones also have a place, so to speak, and the possibility to continue evolving in that. The other is the topic of suicide. No, the topic of suicide viewed as punishment, as if they are stuck, as if they can't leave. I mean, that idea of being stuck, not that either. But especially the topic of punishment with suicide, which I think is so heavy as people perceive it, besides being such a painful and tremendous death. What I have witnessed is quite the opposite. I mean, they are tremendously assisted when they pass away.
It's like they are sheltered, perhaps, right?
Sheltered, assisted, also by souls, so to speak, that somehow know how to embrace that moment. And very respected too. Very respected. So those are things I would like to eradicate, like the idea of punishment in suicide, the notion that people get stuck and can't transcend, etc. I think these are very important matters of awareness.
I would also tell people regarding the topic you're discussing now that if they are religious and believe, for example, in God or a higher being, and if we understand that language, and this may sound cliche, but this is how I see it, that the interdimensional language between planes, ultimately, the connection is through love. Because when people connect and are thinking with emotion about their loved one, that's when the loved one becomes aware. And that is the universal language. And you think there's a God or something like that. It would be very strange for that God who supposedly we are his children to lose a child to suicide and then on top of that punish them. I don't see that either. It doesn't make any sense to me. Yes.
And there's another thing too. I don't know if it happens to you, but I felt it a bit like this, that I feel there are times when there are deaths, like also a bit to settle this idea that, oh, but they died. They were such a good person that they died before their time, or it was karma and they died because of karma. My feeling is also that where I believe more in the universal energy, I feel that suddenly it's like the energy in the universe gets distracted, no? And in those distractions, accidents happen, deaths happen, as if one suddenly goes like, "Phew!" Like what happened? Let's say an energetic distraction. This happens to me too. I would also like that to be understood in that way, because that's how I felt it. Suddenly I've had to deal with, I don't know, accidents involving children, terrible things, and I say, no, this is, and how it comes to me, it's like an energetic distraction, it's an accident. It's terrible to experience and process and everything, but it's an accident. It's not a punishment.
Of course. Yes, I see it more than anything. I mean, I give it the perspective that for me, all of us have an arrival date and an expiration date here. And from my perspective, based on my experience and what I've seen in other mediums, I have the impression that there's no way to delay it or speed it up. You can't delay it, but you also can't bring it forward. And we have milestones in life that we will have to experience, no matter what, because it's part of our soul's plan before coming here. But one of those milestones is the day and time we are going to depart. Now, but free will is how you reach each of the milestones in your life. Now, in what condition you arrive, whether you are prepared or not. And that can be, for example, a typical milestone in life is an encounter with someone from which children will be born. That is a milestone. It is defined. Now, whether that was a fleeting encounter for one night now, or if it is a meeting that lasts a lifetime together, that will depend on the free will of both and the life paths they are taking, the sequences they are manifesting here. Now, when someone reaches their departure milestone, From here, they can arrive very well and end their departure like Buddha with a smile on their lips, or they could leave through suicide. That is part of free will and part of the experience. But the milestone is immovable for me. That's how I understand it. How do we depart? It's our responsibility. When we have it defined beforehand, that's how I understand it. Mariela, is there any message that the guides generally give you? What do the guides usually communicate? The most important thing, perhaps for the audience of this video.
Yes, look, in general, what they show the most has to do with the path of the soul. I feel like what your mark is in the life you are living, which is also very clarifying for people when they are really a bit lost about what they want to do, what they don't want to do, even regarding vocations. And of course, it is worked on in such a way during the session that it makes sense. Not just saying anything, but it makes sense. Which brings me a bit to what I was telling you earlier, this feeling. I was mentioning about what I like to do, what I do, why it connects me with that vibration, which I think is a bit of that. I mean, the essence and what makes you vibrate is generally somewhat present in childhood. There is a part of childhood where you can't recognize what made you vibrate. That's why I feel that channeling also connects a lot with that, with what makes you vibrate, with what makes sense to you. A bit of this and also a bit of clarifying the moment, clarifying the current moment, clarifying what lies ahead, which also gets mixed up for me, but I always point it out in the sessions that it also gets mixed up with clairvoyance. Suddenly I see things and I say, I see this. This is not being told to me, nor am I. I see this. And it's the same thing that sometimes happens to me in mediumship sessions. Suddenly, things from clairvoyance come to me, or messages come through, and I say, this message is not from your dad or your mom. This comes from somewhere else. I'm receiving this from somewhere else, and this is the message. But I always clarify it. I say, this is mine, this is from here, or this is from there. But in general, that plus the current moment and what is coming ahead and how to approach it.
What would you say to someone who is thinking about going to a medium or a channeler? What would you suggest to that person?
Well, first of all, have a lot of openness. Be very open, of course, to receiving information, and also be very willing to connect emotionally, both in a channeling session and in a connection with a loved one. Be emotionally open, meaning to be able to deeply interpret the messages that are coming, not just staying on the surface or lightly, but to delve deeper. Don't go with expectations or a lot of anxiety, that kind of thing, which is the same as I say when they ask me, how long do you wait to attend to someone after they have passed away? I always say it doesn't have to do with the time of the deceased, because you can't connect immediately. It has to do with your grief, with how you are experiencing it. Because when the person has just passed away and you are very sad, very anxious, your expectations are too high, which is obvious because you are very anxious, very sorrowful. So you want to know everything. You want to know how they are. You want to feel them. You want to smell them. So it's like saying, no, calm down. That's why it's important to wait for some time to pass, or for you to feel that deep down in some way that death has been more processed. It has been a death where there has been time to say goodbye, etc. Because if not, it can cause a lot of frustration. And you can see that in the sessions. I've had people who suddenly come in and take the session just like that without asking. And their level of expectation is so high that they get angry, they get frustrated. That's why it's advised not to do it so immediately. So those are things to keep in mind for everything, to have a very open mind, to be willing essentially to also connect emotionally with the messages that come from all directions, and essentially not to have those huge expectations.
And when it comes to choosing a medium, if you have a range of 10 possibilities, what would you recommend? What should they look for?
Oh, I think that's really, um, I think, let's see, I think that the thing with lots of lights, lots of light, lots of light, lots of fanfare and things like that always makes me distrustful. So it's like feathers. I mean, these things with feathers, too much decoration, always causes me a well, as a sense of distrust. But I also think empathy is vital. I mean, like seeing that that the medium is empathetic, that they are a close person, that they are also sincere, that if you go to see, I don't know, if in this case now with social networks, if you watch reels or whatever, listen and see who resonates with you, who you feel closer to in belief, in thought, etc. And also who you have a connection with. Sometimes it happens that you see people and you say, this is it, here it is, or with this person, this one. I think it's about listening to yourself deep down. Listening to yourself, you see, you don't make mistakes when you listen to yourself. That's how it is.
I completely agree with you. Ultimately, it's about who resonates with you, who moves you from within. I mean, deep down, feeling yourself and intuitively knowing who you resonate with the most. And being honest with yourself beyond the lights, beyond who they are, whether they have many or few followers, those things don't matter. Who you resonate with. That's the most important thing. And yes, obviously, if you have good references from people you know, well, take them into account.
Exactly. Of course, of course.
Mariela, to wrap up, how can people watching this video, this episode of The Invisible, find you?
They can find me through my Instagram page, which is soymedium.mariela. There. I always tell them I have a link there, and in that link is all the information about the sessions, the prices. My WhatsApp is there. Everything is in that link on the account, on my profile. That's how they can contact me. My schedule is there, everything is there.
Is there anything you'd like to communicate to the people watching this video that you think was left a bit pending?
What could it be? Look, I think one important thing to communicate to people is that we are not such special beings. Nah, this thing about how you have a gift. We are not such special or evolved beings or anything like that. I mean, the things that happen to us happen to everyone. The things that hurt us hurt everyone. We have our own pains, we have our own wounds and unresolved issues. So in some way, when I connect, maybe before connecting, I was hanging clothes or renting. I mean, we are just like everyone else, just like everyone else. So from that point of view, like also, that makes it so that you can feel we are so close to you because we are a pair, and that we can also make mistakes, absolutely, and that this is a learning process. I mean, this is like a commitment because, of course, Apuy, as much as you deep down love doing this, and it is an absolute commitment, but also based on the fact that we are ordinary human beings and that we are discovering all this, that we talk about what we see, but nothing more than we might be wrong about many things, and at some point we will realize, but that I believe that humanizing the medium is vital.
Mariela, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Esteban.
Thank you for attending this interview. And if you liked it, share it, give it a like, share your experiences with us. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe. And before you go, I recommend this video where we talk about 13 intuitive vision, okay? The remote vision of Jacobo Grinberg. See you in the next video.